Instagram. It's all Instagram. And we've got some friendly people you can go and talk to. And also, we have, there's the friendly people, Camilla and Gert. They're at the booth. Go and talk to them. There's a heap of prizes that we have. And we also have silently working the TV team upstairs. That's the SSW TV team doing a whole lot of interviews. You can go and watch it live if you want, or they'll be collecting interviews afterwards. Okay, they're also recording some of the sessions here, so it should be good. There, isn't that cool? My goodness, how the world has changed. And we have invested quite a bit in that TV team, and we are doing it in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and now Newcastle. That's our latest office. They're all running on PTZ cameras. All right, let's kick off the session. Good morning, everyone. Today I am doing a session called 10 Tips to Rocking Azure Architect. And I spend most of my time dealing with Azure and dealing with all the software developers at SSW. It's our core platform. And these tips that I'm going to go through are basically a combination of lots of the conversations that happen inside SSW to the other guys, kind of trying to take them up to the next level from a developer into an architect. So I divided up the session like this, where we talk about the architecture center. Then I want to talk about DevOps and DevOps in the world of Azure and dollars. Dollars are super important, and you can't be an architect without talking about dollars. My favorite topic, and often developers' least favorite topic. They just want to do work. And then I want to talk about a bunch of other rules to better Azure. So this is me. I am the Chief Architect at SSW. I'm also a Microsoft Regional Director. Been a Scrum Master since the very beginning, trained by Ken Schwaber. And these days, I spend a lot of my time working with the technical side of the business. So, and that's our latest office in Newcastle. We have the nice Ukrainian flags up there. Don't know if everyone picked it up, but subtle. All right, and we've changed everything to dark mode because we've become cool. All right, that's what we had. That's what we have now. Excellent. So, I want you to pull out your phones if you'd like, and you can scan this QR code, and you'll have an app. You'll earn lots of points. And you can run around to the other guys that you see with SSW on, get some points, and there's a heap of prizes, heaps. Look at all the bands. There's Nintendo Switches, whatever, and lots of other cool stuff. The Xbox. Xbox, is that cool? Okay. All right. Okay, now, this one is more important. This doesn't install an app. I just want you to QR code this, and I'm going to ask your opinion of something. Okay? So scan that, and I am going to ask you who you are. I would like to know, do you regard yourself as one person's quick? Okay, are you already a cloud architect? Or do you consider yourself a dev that works on-prem or mainly in the cloud? So we'll come back to these answers shortly. But you can see that most of you already are developers working in the cloud. Okay. And I have another question for you. How long have you been using Azure? 1 year, up to 5 years, up to 10 years, or are you primarily on AWS or Google Cloud or something else? So let's find out. I've actually been using Azure since the beginning. Anyone remember Red Dog? No Red Dogs, maybe. But yes, in the beginning, there was just a few services, and it was easy to say, I'm using 100% of Azure. That would be impossible today. All right, so most of you appear to be in the 1 to 5 year category so far. All right, so that means not too many old people. Okay, now, I did a talk many times. It was about the most important services inside Azure, my favorite 9. It's on the web, you can read it. I've also blogged about it. I'm not covering that today, I'm covering some other things. But if you came because you want to know the most important services to be using and why, that is a good session to have a look at. Okay, they're the most popular ones that we do. And I cover app services, Cosmos DB, API management, logic apps, cognitive services, bots, containers, and a few other things. All right, I want to ask your opinion on this. How many people have used Azure Architecture Center? Okay, if you've used it and you like it, say that. If you have heard of it and you're planning on trying it out, say that. If you've heard of it but you don't plan on using it, it's not up your alley, say that too. All right, we'll come back to that. So I want to talk about this because I think this is one of the first conversations you have with a dev. In our case, they will go to a client and could be a different industry. They have to listen intently what is required, and then they have to kind of pick the right services for this project and propose it to the customer. Sometimes the customer doesn't understand everything we've proposed, but they have enough confidence and they say, go ahead. Now, you don't always want that because you want them to understand as much as possible. Pictures are great. So one of the things that, I'll just take you through the quick steps. We have, don't you love this? We've got new checks that, did you really click on that link? Even though I just authored the PowerPoint. Right. PowerPoint is improving. You can see that we have a whole bunch of things on when you're first talking to a customer, the things to go through, all right? And there is a long, long page on this. But one of these things I particularly want to call out is don't just give them a proposal, give them a picture. Oh, goodness. So this is give them a diagram which is also explaining what you've put together in the proposal. And there is a video on this, you can watch that, but specifically what I want to say, you want to turn what you're proposing into something readable by the client. And I'll just go, this is an example maybe. And this is done using draw.io, or it's been renamed to diagrams.net, okay? Anyone use that? Whoa, 90% of you, that's cool. So it's a nice way, so you just draw what you're planning on doing. I always think this is really important to put in there, and there's lots and lots of examples. If you don't want to use a tool, you can do it in handwritten, it's good enough. And take a photo and put in the proposal. Nobody cares. So do that. But what you really want to do before you show the customer, once you've worked out what you're doing, is use the Architecture Center. Now, when you use the Architecture Center, Microsoft has spent a lot of time, and there is a rule that we have here, and I'll just jump into the Azure Architecture Center. You can browse the architectures, okay? And you can have a look through here. This is the first thing you should be doing. So let's just say you're turning up to a customer and it's a health app, all right? And you're not super experienced in that area, but you think you know what the client needs. So you'd come down here and you'd maybe look at all these, I think, and you'd have a look what's there. They're well defined. They've got case studies with them. You can see like for the identity, security, and monitoring here, they're saying, all right, so this is going to have Azure AD B2C, it's going to have Application Insights, it's going to have Key Vault, Notification Hub, and they're like the cross-cutting concerns across the entire application. And then here is a scenario or simple workflow. So we've got the user that's going through front door, through API management, through app service, and maybe blob storage or Cosmos DB. All right, and then you go down and have a look at all this. They even give you the Visio file. Who uses Visio anymore? Okay, 2 people, okay. And yeah, it'll take you through this, and it'll make you consider some things that you haven't considered. All right, now, if you're just a younger developer who's just trying to learn the cloud, you might just say, I just want to know about serverless. And you might click on one of these guys. I might say serverless with Cosmos DB. There's 200 results for that. Okay, well this looks simple. So we'll click on this, and we'll see. All right, so in this case, there's a shopping cart example. So we're going to use Azure Functions, Cosmos DB. There's going to be a change feed, which allows these services out there to be listening to that. So we've got a tax microservice and a payment one and a fulfillment one. And so you scroll down and you can kind of see how that works. So this is the first step to being more educated and validating what you're doing with proven, samples that will really help you. Okay, this is kind of, if you're going to know one tip, that's a pretty good tip to know. Now, the only thing that they don't have is they don't have the ARM JSON or the ARM Bicep files, which would be super nice. I'm not sure why Microsoft don't do that. Maybe they will do it in the future. You are seeing them improve a lot, and they're adding a lot of them. Now, there's another one that you should be looking at, and that is these cloud design patterns. There's heaps of these, and there's a lot of learning. CQRS is a popular one. We go through, it shows you this. This is actually kind of saying that the normal example, and we've got lots and lots of examples here. So it's just showing you how to split the write and the read. And yeah, so there's a whole lot of detail here. So that's excellent. And I'll just take you through it if there's any other interesting ones here. That one's not bad. Queue-based load leveler. So this is another pattern that a developer might not be familiar with. It's basically saying, look, you get all these tasks, you throw them through a message queue, and they come out. So the task might be coming in. Look at these little things here. They're pretty cool. So the tasks are coming in at a variable rate. It's busy, then it's quiet, and then it's busy again. But what you want to be doing is processing them at a nice, consistent rate. How do you do that? How do you get rid of all those nasty timeouts that keep happening? All right, and so this is a whole series of patterns that you should be familiar with. And I ask the devs, how many hours have you spent on this? And I would say you wouldn't come across somebody that considers themselves an Azure Architect that hasn't spent well over 40 hours specifically on those sites, okay? They haven't just been there and they know they exist, they've been through them, okay? So, yep. Cool. So anyone spent more than 40 hours on those? Okay. All right. Okay. All right, so that is, I think that's useful. I am curious, what do you guys think? Is that a useful tip? Who thinks that's a useful tip? Most. All right, good. Let's move on to something else. I'd love you to open up your phones. Have a look. Tell me which ones you've used. Have you used the Azure CLI or the Developer CLI or the GitHub CLI, the Angular CLI? No React CLI. What's going on there? Why doesn't React have a CLI? All right. Good, good, good. Excellent. All right. Any questions? So one question that you may have is, what is the difference between the Azure CLI and the Azure Developer CLI? All right, let's talk about that. So there is a brand new Azure Developer CLI. And this Azure Developer CLI, I'll just show you. This new warning that PowerPoint's put in is getting tired real fast. But yeah, this is the one I want to show you. I encourage you to watch Scott Hanselman's video on this. It's excellent. And essentially, this is a CLI, instead of using the portal, that will create your environment, your Azure environment, all the services you want. You want Cosmos, you want Key Vault, you want an app service, whatever you want, you can use this via the CLI. Now, they have templates for the different scenarios, Python or .NET. They've got a whole lot of support for all the app services, functions, static websites, etc. And of course, once you've got that, it's very easy to repeat it again for dev, test, production. Okay? There is nothing wrong with going to the portal and clicking and choosing a few things, learning. But when you're at a client site and you're now working on something and that's going forward, that's going to be tested and put in production, it must be repeatable. So you should be using the CLI in that case, all right? And it also includes the templates for the Azure DevOps pipelines and the GitHub Actions. And of course, it includes Bicep, all right? So Bicep, and we'll talk about that in a second. If you're in a multi-cloud scenario and you're not just focused on Azure, then you might want to switch it to Terraform, okay? So there is also command to tear down what you've just done, so you can get it all up and running and efficiently get rid of it. And this is kind of and this is off that page that I just showed you, but you basically select the template, you spin up the environment that you want using the AZD command line, and then you will have your config, you'll do your coding, you will git push. That will trigger all the DevOps processes, deployment, and then it's all spun up, and then you can monitor what's going on. Is there any errors going on? Okay? So that is the beautiful, efficient process. You follow that and get used to it a few times, you're saving yourself heaps of time. Heaps of time. This is the right way to do it. And of course, if you see a dev not doing it this way, tell them, oh, there might be a better way of doing what you're doing. All right, so that's excellent for the first few days with a client. You will finish talking to them and give them a proof of concept with everything included, including all the DevOps stuff that in the past we would put there, as that will go into sprint 1 or maybe sprint 1 and 2 to get all our stuff up and running, because we need to do that before we do the real work. And the client says, no, we'll do that later. Do the real work first, worry about that later, and they just keep on pushing it down the backlog, okay? Here you start solid, and I think you'll have a much happier client, okay? All right, how many people think this is a good tip for them? Okay, about half. All right, tough crowd. Wow, I was a lot more excited. All right, so next question I have. Pull open your phones, please. I would love you to tell me if you've used Bicep before. And if you have, whether you think it's awesome, or you think it sucks, or you got a better solution, or you don't care for it because you're using Pulumi, or something like that. Okay, we're going to come back to this when you've finished answering it. All right, I want you to talk about infrastructure as code. How many people have a high care factor for infrastructure as code? Okay, so I'd say 40% of you. I'd say this is something we've talked about for many years, and it is something that we want to get right, but when you're working with clients, this type of stuff just doesn't seem as important as adding new features for all the problems they have. And we are still not as mature in our industry as we should be. When you look across, we go to client after client after client, and this is a recurring pattern. So I want to first explain to you the problem for those that aren't familiar with it. So we have had a long old rule about manually creating resources in Azure, okay? And so let me just show you this little thing. People come in here, and they will choose what they want, go forward, and they create all these resources. That's their first experience creating a web app, and they continue that experience down the track, and straight away you say, no, 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 no. All right. Now, you can be using exporting that as ARM JSON, all right, which is something, because now we can repeat that. The problem is, we are kind of used to nice things like C#, which is easy to read and easy to debug. You know, if you think about it really, JSON is a data format, and they've tried to inject programming constructs in there. And so there's tools that have come out, such as Farmer, but the generally accepted one now is Bicep, all right? So there's of course other ones like Pulumi and Terraform and other ones, but Bicep is free. Devs love free stuff, right? So that's good. Now, Bicep is a lot more readable. It is purpose-built for this particular problem of creating resources and representing your Azure infrastructure. And when you have a long Bicep file, you can modularize it. You can take pieces out and make it a lot more reusable. So I just want to just quickly show you this. Oops. So let's take a look at an example. Here is William Leonberg's example. He did a number of sessions on just specifically Bicep and getting deeper in there. There's some slides, there's some videos that we put up on SSW TV if you want to get deeper into it. But I just want to show you what it looks like. I'll just jump into demos. He's got these registries, and he's got a full stack web app. So it's just an example, all right? So let's just say he had a full stack web app, and he has got some Bicep files here. What has he got here? Here's his main one. And I just want you to see how it reads. Obviously, it's a lot nicer than JSON. It is purpose-built for you. You can see he's got this is probably very important to know. He's got a module for Key Vault, so he's separated that out. And then he's got another module here for, what is this one? For his storage. And he's got another one here for his database and his web app. So he's split all these out into different modules, okay? So that's a more mature way of separating out these Bicep files. And I think that once you've done that and you look at plenty of examples on the web of how to do your Bicep files, the next step is how do real architects modify all this. And you could say DevOps people as well. Well, they do it in VS Code. So this is our only option. You jump into VS Code, you get this extension, and you will get, have we got a video? Here we go, look, animated GIF. And you'll get nice IntelliSense. This is a nice way to edit and author files, right? Now, I just did say to you that you must do this in VS Code, because that's what I told Melbourne, so Melbourne will be doing that only that way, because a few weeks ago, we got a Visual Studio add-in. So, all right, so if you come across anyone from Melbourne, do not tell them, okay? So, yeah, and that's the extension for Visual Studio. Okay, so you can see that. That is the best way of authoring Bicep files. All right, who thinks that's a useful tip? Okay, 60%, not bad. Okay. Let's talk about another topic, build shock. Now, I have a lot of developers when they first start picking what they want for a project, they are keen as mustard. And you look at their plan and there is a lot of services in there. And you say, all right, so have you worked out the cost of all these services? No, not yet, just making plans, all right. Do you know the cost of everything you've selected? It's every Azure service, including the kitchen sink in there. Well, no, I haven't. We'll worry about that later, okay? And it is a mature Azure Architect will talk dollars from the beginning, and they'll be thinking about dollars from the beginning. Now, if you haven't had anyone ever get cranky at you because of the Azure expense, well, then you're not going to worry about this. Okay? When you have, you will worry about this. So, and this is the reason that business owners are frightened of things like Azure compared with their on-premise stuff. This feels like it could be a runaway train. Now, if you're talking dollars from the beginning with a client, they'll have a lot more confidence that you're cognizant of the dollars rather than just the work you're doing. So, how many people here know their monthly spend? Okay. I would say we have less than a quarter, okay? So that is something you should be aware of. If you've got just a simple web app database reports, many times I ask, they say no friggin' idea, okay? They do not know. So you've got to plan ahead, and it's easy. Well, it is easy now with this pricing calculator. So this pricing calculator is this. All right. So, got a volunteer? Who's smart? Oh, no one. Who loves Australia? Okay, all right. So before you do this, I'll tell you the first thing that you end up spending a little bit of time on this. You pick all this, you work out what services you want, and you work out the costs, and then you lose it. So the very first thing you should do is you should log in, right? Right? Yes, agree? Wrong. We don't log in up there. Well, you can try, but it won't log in if you want me to. You'll log in and you won't be logged in, okay? I don't think you believe me. I'll just do it. Wow. Does anyone do this? Just me get annoyed by this. All right. So we're in. We've gone somewhere else. Back to my pricing calculator. Oh, I'm not logged in. How weird is that? Because that is just put there just to make it feel good. If you want to log in, you click here, of course. Of course you would click there. All right, now we're logged in. All good. There's our login, all right? That's the way you don't lose your stuff. Ask me how I know about this. So let's assume you're talking to a customer and they just want an Angular SQL database solution. All right, we'll do an easy one. Okay, well, I think we'll put that up in the cloud, sir. Yes, I'll be happy. All right. So I click App Service. It got added. I don't know where it got added. It got added somewhere. If you scroll down the page, you'll see it got added down here. All right? So that monthly cost is $4. That's great. Oops, there's a few problems here. I need to change this to Australia. How many people have changed this to their correct city more than 1,000 times? And it still doesn't remember. Okay. And now, of course, it's now, gee, look at how they rip us off for living in this fine country. It's now $68. That's Aussie tax. And of course, we want to save some money, so we'll switch it to Linux. And we are in business. No, back down to $13. Beautiful. And the basic tier, that basic tier won't get us very far on a real production site. I think, well, first of all, you could tell before, you can see there's only, a gig, less than 2 gigs. So we'll go to basic. We'll go to standard. That will give us, that's no good. I want more RAM than that. So I want at least 4 gig to be up and running, and I'm at $87. So I'll go to 3.5. Now I'm at $175. It's getting expensive now for an extra couple of gig of RAM. There is a better way of doing this. If you go to Premium V2, and I still get my 2 gig of RAM, but I get SSDs as well, so much more, and same price. Go figure. So that is a better choice. Anyway, that is that. Can I give this a name? I'll just call this classic app. I'll just say Angular app. Plus SQL. We'll need a SQL database. And where's SQL? There we go. We'll click on SQL. Look, it got added. I think it should spin down here to show us where it got added. But we got our first bit. And we've got our SQL database here. Oh, of course, I must say Australia again. What do we got? What's the cost? Oh, I didn't even see the cost go up. But trust me, it increased from probably $5 to $400 for living in Australia. This is expensive, $400. So we could switch to DTU, okay? This is a blended rate for CPU, RAM, disk I/O, and we are now down at a much more reasonable price, okay? Now, of course, this will depend on how much usage you get out of this, but that's pretty good. Any complaints by anyone? If you were to go with standard, you'll find it increases a little bit. So that's good. I am going to just have a look at that cost. Now, generally when you tell a customer, you'll give them I'm getting good at this, you'll give them a yearly cost. That's a good way of doing it. Now, I'm just going to give them an alternative. You can come in here and say, you know what? You could do a static site. Static sites are pretty good, and we could use Cosmos and Azure Functions. That might be a more modern way of doing it. So we'll come in here and we will choose. Oh, look, you can see these are the popular ones, but I can't even see static sites. But static sites are cool. Let me just scroll down. Where would they be sitting? Web, probably. And static websites. So let's go down here. We'll call this a cool static site. And you can come in here. Now, that will run, that free one, but if you want to have front door with Azure Functions, you will need to choose standard. And now it's gone from $0 to $9, but it's still very cheap. And you'll need a database as well, so I'll come up to the popular stuff, and I will add in Cosmos database. And now we have a comparison of like for like. What have we got here? 23. So you can do the costs here, but this one is clearly easy to choose and much cheaper. So that is a thing that you should be using as you're picking services. You give it to the customer with what you're proposing and the proposed cost from the beginning. Don't encourage them to need to ask you about dollars like that. So, for example, there's a normal service, $146, or the Azure static sites with Cosmos, $50. Okay, and give them. You can have that, or you can have that, something like that. And you should be able to talk every customer into prepaying for at least 1 year. Usually you can get 3 years out of them. Sometimes they don't want to give you anything. They just want to say, just for the time being, let's just see how this runs. But you've got to talk them into at least the 1 year for their own savings. And of course, I've used a contrived example. These things get very expensive very quick. All right, the other thing I want to talk to you about is monitoring. So that's in the beginning, picking stuff and showing them the cost. Then it's about monitoring because things go out of control, and that's what they're always worried about. So how many people already set up alerts on their Azure spend? So there's only, all right, so I would say less than a quarter there. This bit's important and not hard. So you go into cost management, billing, and then you come over here and you go cost analysis, and then you look at this. Now this is the monthly cost going up and up and up, and then at the end of the month it resets. Or you can be looking on a daily basis. You can be there's so many different ways of looking at your spend. But basically, you want your spend to be normal, not up, crazy, and down without explanation. If there's all these peaks and things going on, things are happening and you don't know about it. Now, you wouldn't give a credit card to your partner without a limit, would you? Okay? Same thing here. The other thing to be thinking about, and this is happening more and more, you can read some stories about this, is these denial of wallet attacks. These are vigilantes, I guess, who are trying to damage a company financially just by increasing their cloud spend. So we have some rules about this, but you want to set up alerts, and you can't set up an alert till you have a budget. So you jump in, and you click on Budget, Add, and then you'll have a budget. There is one of the guys here, Bryden Oliver. He talks a bit about this stuff, and you can talk to him. Or there's also Matt Wicks as well. You'll get lots of information, but there's a whole bunch of stuff about managing costs. This is a really important thing to do. And then you've got your budget. Once you have your budget, great. Now we can set up our alerts, and that's what you're after. And there's your cost alerts. You go in and set up your cost alerts. All right. How many people think this was a useful tip for you? Okay, so this we're getting about 80%. All right, so we're talking dollars. That's good. All right. The other thing I want to bring up, and this is about the on-prem stuff. And I bring this up because it's a hard one to convince a business owner, an IT manager about this, because they will focus on the monthly spend that they're potentially incurring on Azure or the cloud. But when you talk to them about the monthly spend on their on-premises stuff, it's not really a monthly spend. We already have that. Like that's not in the equation. Yeah, but like, do you have an idea what that monthly spend is? Well, there isn't really. Like, there's a air conditioning cost, of course. It's very small. It's not in the equation, and that's probably because it's a sunk cost. They don't really believe it is a cost. It's not going to be factored in part of the decision. It's more comparing what you're going to be stung for from Microsoft, essentially. So what is the cost? It is not that hard to tell them now. So I will tell you, most of the time they'll say they don't know what the cost is. You come in here and you can define your workloads. You can add a server workload here and answer all these questions. Answer the questions about databases, about storage, about networking, and then they want to know more about what you're paying for software assurance, virtual machines, electricity costs. And by the way, all this stuff is there by default, so you don't have to do very much apart from put in some of the specifics you know. And they will, if they want to dispute this cost, they will very quickly tell you, well, that one isn't included, so you'll get closer to that number. So there is a lot of costs here. They will end up, very quickly, you'll end up with a cost generation. And I've put in some screenshots here just so you can see. But it is, it's not hard that they're spending way more than they ever thought they were. And this will give them a shock. And then they'll say, yeah, that's somewhere in the right ballpark. And it will increase their taste for Azure or any other clouds. All right, so, and it's useful in the right scenario, and it doesn't take you much time. How many cares about this one? Is this a useful tip? All right, so about a third of you. Good. Let's talk about learning. We all want to learn. We all want to get better. Azure is a monster, right? There's so much stuff to learn, and it's all there in docs.microsoft, right? So where do you start? Well, if you remember this scenario when the JavaScript book was released and then the good parts was released, you know which one everyone bought, okay? So it's the same story here. Now, the very first tip I'm going to give you is this Azure Developers Guide. Now, this thing is free, great. It's a 140-page PDF. It is released each year. It covers the basics of cloud-native apps, Visual Studio, and the general DevOps story from Microsoft, okay? Here it is. I encourage you to start with this, okay? It's a nice big PDF, and you'll learn a ton of stuff. Now, I am also going to tell you that learning Azure beyond that first step depends on how much you want to spend. Some want to spend, they're comfortable spending $500 a year. Some are tight asses, and they want to spend nothing on any of this stuff, and there's plenty on YouTube. So I would say you can put it into from 500 down to 0, and your classifications are essentially, am I going to buy Pluralsight, or LinkedIn Learning, or Udemy, or YouTube, all right? So that people are in different classifications here. Now, what I want you to understand is by just watching these videos or reading this documentation, you don't learn as much as doing it and watching it and doing it and watching it. But you have to have your Azure instance. You have to be paying for that. You know, you have to create it, tear it down, etc. You have to factor in your pay-as-you-go costs with Azure. Now, there is a solution for this, and this is Microsoft Learn. And this one gives you the tutorial and your Azure instance. Of course, when you finish it, it automatically tears it down. But this is a very nice way of learning and doing, and it will accelerate it much better than any of those other alternatives. So, and they have different paths. So essentially, let's just say you want to get up and running, you want to learn what DevOps is, et cetera, and do some basic, create a new project, et cetera. You'll have this, and there'll be 8 modules. And then you might want to start doing an enterprise DevOps, okay? Let's get a bit nastier. And there's 7 modules here, and then, you know, it goes on and on, okay? So that is something worth looking at. How many people think that is a useful tip for you? Okay, all right, I think that's around 80%, so that's a popular one. Next one I want to tell you about is ClickOps. You don't want to be deploying your app by going Azure Portal, Resource Group, click to App Service, Advanced Tools, drag and drop different artifacts. That's not the right way to do it. Okay, that's ClickOps. In addition, you don't want to have a hard time debugging. Like you're getting a timeout, you want to increase a timeout value. You can go into the portal, find the right setting, change that, restart the server, et cetera. Or you can be using the Azure CLI, which is a nicer way, but it's not that friendly to do it that way. So we work inside VS Code and Visual Studio, right? So install this VS Code Azure extension pack, and you'll have a much nicer experience, okay? In your sidebar, you will be able to explore what you've got, and you'll be able to right-click and change values, restart things. So that is the nice way of doing it. It avoids ClickOps, and it avoids painful debugging. So it's much easier. This is the tool. I think that that's a really nice way of doing it. And this is what you typically would be doing in a dev environment. This is what you're doing when you're doing your initial proof of concept. I'm not saying to be doing this long term. Of course, once you've got going and you've worked out what's going on, all the right stuff should be being done in proper DevOps processes in GitHub Actions or Azure Pipelines, et cetera. All right. Beautiful. And don't forget one other small thing, Visual Studio has a Cloud Explorer as well, so you should be having that. All right, those tips. Useful? All right, I will say touch under half. All right, there is another very useful tip for Azure Architects, and that is this site. Now, this is not a Microsoft site, although it was done by a Microsoft developer initially. So this guy from Microsoft, he just did heaps of these articles. And these articles, any of these articles, they're quite detailed. They tell you exactly what to do. So let's just say your site is getting swamped. You could come in here and just type scale. What do we got? How do you scale Azure App Services? I don't know. So you click on here, and it will tell you exactly what to do. So you can, oh, right, so this is how you manually scale, and this is how you do a custom auto scale. So every single bit is told to you. And there is pretty much every scenario you can imagine in a normal set of problems from clients is on this site. Okay? It's your secret sauce. And it's actually, I think it's all on GitHub. Yeah. So you could edit it if you thought it was wrong. Maybe you can't trust it after all. All right. So how many like that tip? Okay. All right, 70%. Good. Now, the other stuff is make sure you're caching your common traffic using front door. You could be using Cloudflare. That is an important thing to be doing. One other thing that we talk about a bit, on a project, and there's a video you can watch, and there's a rule here, but in a project, make sure somebody is assigned to be a cloud architect. So a typical project typically has a couple of developers, maybe 3 or 4. Somebody is a solution architect, others are software developers. You need to have one cloud architect that is responsible just for the cloud architecture on a project. You don't typically have a project software developers throw them in a room and don't allocate a scrum master. I think you end up getting yourself in trouble without a cloud architect that who is the throat to choke. When you ask a team, all right, who's in charge of the cloud story in this project, they will typically say, oh, we all are. You know, when everyone is, no one is. Okay? So it's better to have a role. Somebody in our team is taking on the responsibilities of the cloud architect. There's so many problems that will happen where it just happens. And you want somebody to be caring about load, security, and cost. Somebody must be responsible. Okay? Optus should have had one of those, shouldn't they? Yes. All right. I also want to just throw in a couple of quick bonus ones. This is a nice little site. It's handy sometimes. And it just will, like when you're remoting into another box, you're not really sure what the differences are. Right now, depending on where we are right now, obviously Australia East is the quickest, and Australia Melbourne is the second quickest. And I don't know, I didn't know that Japan East would be quicker than the west coast of the USA. I thought the pipe to the USA was way bigger and would be faster. Okay? So this is very handy to get a quick idea of what's going on. If you want something a little bit more advanced, Azure Speed is good. So there is heaps, little test file uploads and lots of stuff, CDN tests, Azure regions, availability zones. There's a lot of good stuff here. Unfortunately, he's prostituted his site with all these ads everywhere. Just ignore all that stuff, but it is a very good site, right? All right, cool, cool. One more, okay? That is new services are being spun up. You might be at the very beginning of your project, you've got a long runway. That might allow you to potentially choose a service that is not, that's got, it's in preview. If you are doing a site that's going live very, very soon, you do not want to be doing that. So you want to know what's available right now, what's in preview, and what's in development. You could do lots of, I don't know, you could Cosmos. Actually, containers, that'd be a good one, wouldn't it? And see what's going on here. I'm using containers. I don't know what's current, what's new, what's live now. And this will tell you all that. You can set all your different, I just want to know what's available now, or I just want to know what's in preview because I want to use something cool. Okay? So this is a helpful little site as well. All right. So I am going to finish it off there. I think we have a few more minutes. I will encourage you to scan that. If you scan that, you get some extra points, give yourself some extra prizes as well. I want to go through the answers you guys gave us. So most of you were developers on-prem. I feel sorry for you. Okay. I have some other advice. So, good, good, good. Excellent. And we've got 20% of the room as actual cloud architects. That's awesome. All right. Most of you, as we learnt before, have been using Azure from 1 to 5 years. I'm surprised there's no one here, oops, no one here that's been using it for over 10 years. No. What about you, William? No? About 6 to 10, yeah. Azure is only like 10 years old. So the Azure Architecture Center, most of you had not heard of it. Okay. Well, there's all your value in that one, because that's the golden egg, that one. The CLI tools, which ones have you used? Okay, so the Azure CLI, Angular CLI, we've got some front-end people, and the Developer CLI, not many. Okay, great. And Bicep. Okay, so a third of you already know it's awesome. For the rest of you, I would say it is awesome. And it would have been awesome if we had had this many, many years ago, because Microsoft have inflicted a lot of cruel and unnecessary punishment on us for many years. And this is a much nicer way of doing it, and get on board on Bicep. Okay. And finally, Microsoft came up with a product that has a cool name. How often do they do that? Must have been an ex-Googler or something. Bill shock. Have you experienced bill shock? Look at you. So many of you haven't. But these people, I'm sure, have good stories to tell you about when they weren't monitoring their costs. Or they put it in and it was small and they weren't monitoring, and then neither was the business. I bet you, when COVID first happened, we were going through all our Azure bills. And I'm sure most businesses were too, yes. So after we cancelled all the free pizzas, it was straight onto, what's the Azure bill? What can we kill? So, in summary, so I went through a lot of different tips. I've tried to pick the good ones from our rules. There's heaps more, but the Architecture Center is your number one. There's the rest. If you can get your DevOps story nicely, And if you don't know Bicep, which is 2/3 of you, get a handle on it, okay? And once you've gone through that Microsoft Learn, you can put it in your LinkedIn profile, okay? You can put me as a reference. Nobody checks them anyway. So then the other thing is to do and worry about dollars from the beginning. Dollars are really important. Thank you. Any questions? I'm happy to take questions too. Question, sir.
One of the bill shocks I've seen is in Azure Logging, so App Insights. Do you have any suggestions on? I know that you can put a limit on it, which is good, but it's one of those things that you just don't know how much it's going to cost until you see the result of what you're at. So do you have any suggestions on how to?
So the question is about bill shock and application insights. You want a lot of logs when you have a problem. Most of the time you're getting a lot of logs and you're not using them. Has anyone had bill shock with application insights? 2, 3. All right. So how do you deal with that one? Budgets and alerts? Same?
Try and limit the type of logging you do, reduce the noise. Just log just the important stuff. App Insights, you can do some sampling, so it only does like a percentage of the logs, doesn't log absolutely everything. And you can bump that up when you have a real issue that you're trying to pin down. What else can we do?
I would say that the problem with application insights is the same as anything else. If you have a budget and you're watching it and you have alerts and you're using them and you're not getting what you want and you need more, you don't want to be using, you just don't want to have the logs there that are running away. There's just, and also it has performance implications as well. So you just got to be careful on that. Any other questions?
Did anyone have a denial of service attack on the questionnaire there?
Has anyone experienced a denial of service attack?
The denial of what, sorry?
And did you get to the bottom of where it was coming from? Yep. And what was the story? And were they specifically targeting you?
Not sure that it was us specifically, but it seems to be within our IP address range.
Right.
A few different IPs that had. We kind of by looking at analyzing the traffic that was coming into our system, looking at their most common sources.
Right.
Geographically.
How long after they started did you discover it?
We discovered it fairly reasonably quickly, probably within about a couple of hours.
Right.
It sort of ramped up. Once it got to probably about hour 9, is when we really started taking action, because we saw it was going to be a significant threat. So at that point, we kind of put all the resources into investigating where it's coming from and how to stop it.
Yeah, when these type of things happen is when you learn which things that you're missing logs on. And there's a long range of different things. Sometimes your firewall doesn't have long logs. There's a lot of different things where you're just not keeping enough logs. We've been through this and it's been very painful when you're blind. Yeah. Right.
We had to build or find something to actually analyze that data and see where it's coming from.
How many people here have experienced a cyber attack? Right, okay. I think we have certainly learnt a lot of forensic cyber firms that will do kind of walk over different environments and tell you what pieces are missing and what stuff they would need to be able to solve this easily. You know, that's been really good learnings. Other companies sometimes get somebody who is authorized to come in and shut things down and say, go back to backups. And it's pretty extreme, but it is a very good way of learning when you can be in a controlled, you know, basically you've got to walk through this stuff. Yes. Any other questions? All right, that's a wrap. Thank you and enjoy your conference.